What is happening in Myanmar? I'm Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. Things are not looking too good in Myanmar right now. It appears that they may be on the brink of a civil war. Currently, the military has organized a coup against the government, and they are the de facto ruling power of the country. Now, before we get too deep into the story, I want to give some background information. First of all, Myanmar is a country in Southeast Asia. It's had many issues before. Its past is ripe, and even its present, with these issues of violence and genocide and whatnot. But they have been making strides towards peace and democracy. This country is situated in between Bangladesh and Thailand. It's home to about 54 million people. So, this podcast's home country is Canada. It's actually a larger country than Canada. Things are not looking too good, as we said, right now. The military there organized a coup and they overthrew the current government. They are now the de facto ruling party within the country, and that was achieved via threat of force. One thing you have to understand is the military, or the army, is the single strongest entity within any country. You can say the politicians are the most powerful, but that's only when the military is operating as they should be, which is subservient to those politicians and further to the people. If the military, though, as an entity, goes AWOL, who is going to stop them? It certainly will not be those same politicians. It won't be the people. It won't be the local police. The military are unmatched when it comes to combat ability. When they are taking orders from the politicians, then fine. No issues there. But if one day they turn around and say, hey, we're the boss now, nobody has anything that they can do to stop that. This is one reason why having proper leadership, strong ethics and morals, and all the other mechanisms that create a functional army are key in a successful democratic country. Without those fail-safes there, a regime or entity like the military can take over in the blink of an eye, as we've seen here. Now, once the Myanmar military took over, they declared a state of emergency, which is set to last for 1 year, according to reports, and that's going to grant them further judicial powers to carry out their aims. So you can see they are somewhat still trying to play along. The ruling power doesn't have to grant or enable a state of emergency. They could easily achieve their aims through threat of force. If you don't listen to what they're saying, they can shoot you, they can put you in jail, they can round you up. That would be the worst case scenario, where they say, forget the rules, we're making the rules now. But at least here, they're still somewhat complying, declaring the state of emergency. Of course, they broke all the rules by removing the current government, but we can see here they're still trying to maintain some semblance of functioning society. Perhaps it's a move to at least quell some of the concerns of the populace. Otherwise, it'd be all-out chaos right now. Now, the first question that comes up is, how did the country even get here? This story might sound vaguely familiar. Take this in. According to the BBC, there was a general election which the country's National League for Democracy party won by a landslide. Their leader, the individual who won the election, the party leader, is called Suu Kyi, and I hope I've pronounced that correctly. She's a female. The military had supported the opposition party, though, so obviously when the results came in, they were not happy. The opposition party, when they found out they lost in this supposed landslide, they caused a scene. They caused a ruckus. They demanded a rerun of the vote, claiming the entire election was rigged and widespread fraud was at the root of their party's loss. The elections committee heard that. Reportedly, they looked into it, they did an investigation, and they stated there was no evidence to support these claims here from the losing opposition party. Obviously, though, that wasn't good enough to contain the situation. Things got more and more out of hand. As a new session of parliament was set to open, the coup occurred. The military stormed in and detained these various politicians, including seizing the reins of power for themselves by taking the previous commander-in-chief, the individual who we said won the election, and detaining her. So you take away, I'm not sure if it's the president or the prime minister, whatever term they use, but the equivalent of that in Myanmar. The military came in, stormed the place, detained her and some of her fellow politicians. Now, who's in charge? The commander-in-chief of the military is a man named Min Aung Hlaing. And once again, I hope I've pronounced that correctly. Let's just call him Min by his first name. He is believed to be calling the shots now. The commander-in-chief of the military executed the coup. He's the one. Now, the good news is that Suu Kyi, the rightful winner of the election, isn't thought to be dead. The military and the coup didn't result in complete bloodshed. It seems the army has simply put her under house arrest. That's what the reports are saying. And those same conditions apply to the other members of her party who were also captured. The army is clearly nuts here, but this is one thread of intelligence that they have shown. The first thing that they did that was somewhat intelligent was not full-on imposing draconian laws. They're going to do that through these national emergency measures, but they're still following the rules to some extent. The second thing they did that wasn't entirely foolish was not executing the duly elected leader of the country. It seems like obviously there was a plan here. It wasn't pure chaos. If it was something spontaneous, you wouldn't expect this kind of planning and strategy. If it was some complete psycho who took over, who wasn't concerned with the way they would appear, they would say, forget declaring the emergency, it's a waste of time. We'll just do things the way we want to do. If they were simply concerned with revenge and getting rid of Suu Kyi, you might have expected them to just kill her on the spot or throw her into prison, but house arrest. So, once again, you see here, they're trying to maintain an image for themselves. See, the entire defense of the military is they're going with the election was stolen, it was widespread fraud. They're putting on the show as if they are doing it for the people. The people deserve a fair and free election. That wasn't the case here. Therefore, we're going to come in and storm the place with our military force and create a scenario where that can happen. Now, if you said that, but you came in, didn't give the proper respect to whatever you're going to call it, the rules, the laws, and declare a state of emergency, if you're going to go in there and execute the person who won, then you would no longer be able to make that argument that your actions were on behalf of the people. Clearly not, because you've thrown the country into chaos, which was inevitable either way, because that's what the strategy entails. But further, you're going to do away with the legislative power. You're not going to bother following protocol. You're going to kill someone who is a politician who ran and won. That's a bad look all around. In fact, if you did that, if they actually assassinated I'm not sure if it's the prime minister or the president, other countries would probably have gone in there already. America, Europe, anyone who is concerned with the implications of that, believers in democracy, would probably have shown up and shut that down immediately. Because they're playing in a clearly bad game, but one that isn't purely tainted, there is some leeway given to them. Now, of course, we know, as an educated listener and understander of the news, that the military likely does not have these positive aims, that they're not simply doing this because they want a free and fair election. Because, as we've stated, the election committee already looked into it. They didn't find evidence, and I have not seen any evidence backing up the claims of the military. It seems like a rouse. It's simply a distraction. It's a reason for them to do what they have to do. They have an ulterior aim. If you think their primary aim really is to have a fair and free election, there are probably other ways to get that done that didn't require the deposing of the heir or the winner of the election, that did not require imposing something like military-ruled government for 1 year, as they've put it. There are other things to do there, but still, they're playing this game, a silly one, but it is having consequences, as we'll get to later. There are certain countries who are not willing to even condemn them right now because of that gray area. Many countries in Asia are saying it's an internal problem. China is not wanting to get their hands dirty. They actually stopped a UN vote, as we'll get to in a little bit. But there is a strategy here, and that's the problem with the general claim saying that an election is fraudulent. It's actually something of a perfect disguise, because as you fight a battle with that banner, the election's fraudulent, we're going to get a free election, it looks like you're fighting on behalf of democracy. It might look like to the average person that you're doing a good thing, especially if they believe you. If they feel like the mechanisms of the vote and things went wrong, people want a free election, And they're going to view you as the idol or the avatar of that, as someone willing to put it all on the line to earn back democracy. But here's the thing, it's a cover. In reality, it's likely the opposite, that you are destroying the democracy, but you have this reasoning of trying to uphold it as the foreground for your movement. Now, there will be people who see through that. And as we'll talk about, many citizens in Myanmar are protesting against this. They don't accept it. But at the same time, there are individuals who might not see through it, depending on how good the propaganda or the explanation was. They may believe that, yes, this is actually the case here. The military had to do this because the election was stolen. And here's the thing. We don't know for sure. The committee looked into it. They're saying they don't see any evidence. But the military is pressing and the opposition keep pressing. And that simple fact of pressing, creating the conspiracy that you're being lied to, that's enough to ensnare people. And that's the issue with this. There has to be consequences for getting it wrong. And this is a lesson for the rest of the world. If you as a politician are willing to bet your entire career on the fact that the election that you lost was stolen or fraudulent, then let's make sure that's a career bet. You better know for sure that you're saying the truth, because if you're not, you can create a situation like what we're seeing in Myanmar, something that almost happened in America. And after a thorough investigation, after members of your own party, whatever, confirm that fraud was not a major factor in this election, there has to be consequence to you. It cannot be something appealing to a politician, because every politician who loses can simply use that as their excuse and they can rile up an army. The size, of course, will depend on how good they are at riling up that army, but if you lose and the instant you do that, the best strategy is to declare that it was fraudulent. That's not going to fly in a democracy. That's a dangerous game to play. And we are slipping into that in other parts of the world. And this here is the end game. This is what happens when you go down that rabbit hole. Truth has to be the primary value. You can't have half the country thinking something was fraudulent and the other half thinking it was not. That is not a sustainable long-term recipe for success. In fact, it's a recipe for a coup, like we've seen here. This is what happens in Myanmar when you go down that path. It's a miracle it didn't happen in America and a couple of other countries who have dabbled in this sort of trickery. And that's not to say that an election can't be fraudulent. If it is fraudulent, let's investigate it. Let's hear the claims out. And that should be the proper procedure, actually. A politician loses, they feel confident that something was fraudulent, then sure, you have an independent committee, maybe the election committee, whoever, that it's their job to look into it, to investigate. The FBI, the RCMP, whichever unit is best suited for that job. I think all of these cases should be heard. They should be looked into. Because who knows, at the beginning, maybe there is fraud. But after it comes out and it's decisive that there isn't, that has to be the end of it. And if you're a politician who continues to fight even though there is no proof, no evidence on your side, there should be reputational consequences for that. At that point, the jig is up and we have to get with the times here. Otherwise, this is where we're heading. Now, another thing that I want to point out is that the military cannot have a political leaning. This is another issue that luckily not many Western countries face, and it's not true for the rest of the world, but in Canada and America and Europe, that's what we try to strive for, and this is the exact reason. Having a military with a political leaning is disastrous. We saw in the article, the military was actively backing the opposition. A military, as the strongest entity in a country, should not be swayable by politics. They have to be apolitical. If it's a liberal, socialist, conservative, whatever, whoever's in power, that is who the military has to serve, and it's their duty. Because the people elected in a properly run democratic system, those are the representatives of the people, and the will of the people. It's the military's job to respect that and uphold it. The military fundamentally is there to protect and preserve the integrity of the citizens. It's not to preserve and protect the integrity of the military or the chief commander of the military. That's something akin to an authoritarian regime. People who actively try to politicize the military are playing a very dangerous game, because politics, as we know in today's world, is deranging. It's polarizing. It will make you crazy, and oftentimes it's not logical. It's nonsensical. We've seen that, and we've seen how the discourse has evolved throughout time. Politics is just a toxic bin of waste right now, unfortunately. That's the way it's become. And you don't want that anywhere near the people who are holding all of the artillery in your country. Once they get riled up and they start believing in political causes and something has to happen because of that and that, you see what happens here. The military is not dumb. They know how powerful they are. If they feel they're the only agent who can get something done, well, they're going to do it. It could very obviously have been something like the commander-in-chief convinced his underlings somehow that the election truly was manipulated. Now, he may know that's not the case. He may know that he's doing this because he has ulterior motives, because he wants to run the country, or he wants to put a puppet into place so we can run it from behind the shadows, but these soldiers themselves may not know that. And if you're a soldier who took an oath to your country, and you truly believe democracy has been stolen from you, that's a very powerful thing. And people will fight for that. Dangerous game here, and the root cause is lies, misinformation, and these strategic incentives for parties like the military to become political. Not a good recipe and not a good pairing. So now fast forward, what's happening today in Myanmar? The military has replaced many politicians with their own people. So that includes various ministers and deputies in finance, health, the interior and foreign affairs, and there we have another hint as to perhaps why the military is lying. If their main aim was simply to bring about a fair election, why are they here picking and choosing who has these positions of power now? Why are they picking the new health minister, the internal and foreign affairs ministers? Why are they doing that? That doesn't sound democratic to me. Because they're not trying to be democratic. It's pretty clear they're not simply here to run a fair election. They have some interest in detailing who holds power in the country. That's why they're putting their people into certain positions here. And, it could turn out where maybe they do try to run an election, but the president or the prime minister isn't simply the only shot caller in a country, and we have to learn that. Biden, Trump, they weren't the only ones making the calls. The ministers and deputies, they have major roles to play too. And maybe if you can replace all the pivotal ministers with your military buddies, it won't matter who wins the democratic election. Because these other forces here may surmount to enough power to get your agenda pushed or whatever. This is very alarming. The fact that they deposed the duly won victor of the election, and they're also replacing the allies there of that individual, that they're putting in their own people into the minister and deputy roles, that's alarming. It's dangerous, and it's something that should be kept an eye on. I'll say it once more, the military has no role in politics in a democratic system. There is no universe in which it makes sense for the military to be appointing the health minister, the finance minister, the interior ministers, or whatever. There are so many conflicts of interest there, so many potential problems that could occur. It's just something that only is going to happen in a flawed system that's already fallen from where we're supposed to be. And that is Myanmar today. It's a disaster. Now, once again, I will reiterate, the army has come forward and they're saying they will hold a quote-unquote free and fair election in 1 year when the state of emergency ends, and that's another question mark. Why 1 year? What are the plethora of things that the army could dip their fingers into in that year? If they simply wanted to run a free and fair election, wouldn't that be something you prioritize? Get done sooner than the 1 year? It's fishy, it's chaotic, and it's wrong. If you believe that what they're doing here is first of all trying to run the election, or secondly, if they do run it, that it will in fact be free and fair, you have another thing coming. Clearly it's a malicious group looking to either directly or indirectly influence the election or those in power. They know they can't stay in power for too long, the military. Citizens in other countries are condemning them, they're looking at them with scrutiny. Their time is limited. The military will not be the de facto authority for very long. Maybe that's why they said in 1 year things will get back to normal. There's no need to come in here and start a war, kick us out. We'll leave on our own in 1 year. But in that 1 year, the damage they do to democracy and politics in that country, it could be untold. It could be completely destructive to the very entity of what that country was striving for. It's a dangerous game they're playing here, and once again I have to point to the strategy. It seems like they know what they're doing. They had a plan, and they're sticking to it. Those are the most dangerous enemies you can face, people who are intelligent and those who have accounted for various possibilities. Now, I've made reference to the term puppet before, and that's another question that I have. Who really is in charge? Is it the military or the opposition that they backed? Because remember, at the beginning, it wasn't the military who was running for presidency themselves. It was actually them backing the opposition political party. So, if it was the opposition party who was the one calling the shots, we would have likely seen them on the throne, making some announcements, them being the ones replacing certain people here and there. But that's not what happened. The military is the ones who seized all the reins of control. They're calling the shots very clearly. So, it seems like that the military who backed these politicians or whatever, those were actually the true puppets, the politicians who are under the sway of the military. Because we see here what's happening. Now imagine for a second that the opposition party actually won the election. The opposition party, based on what we've seen here, would likely not be the ones thinking for themselves. They'd be acting on behalf of the military. Because we see how strong the military is today. And when they've been given power, the military has clawed up and taken it. The opposition party, they're nowhere to be seen. No one's heard a peep from them. Simply puppets. So these are the people to really watch out for. Not truly the opposition party, but the military. As well, global communities, including Europe and America, have condemned the military, and they are threatening to take action if the issue is not corrected very soon. China, as I alluded to before, did something very interesting though. They blocked a UN Security Council statement condemning the coup. Because that's how the UN works. Big countries have these veto powers, so it's another reason why the UN is a failed entity. China gets to call the shots on what constitutes a worthy act of condemnation. Once again, the question is, in what universe does that make any sense? So the UN hasn't officially condemned it because China said don't do it, and they listened. That's the organization that you're dealing with. Now, the citizens of the country have taken to the streets to protest it. It is cited that the largest public demonstrations since 2007 are occurring right now. As well, I don't think I have to spell it out. This situation came dangerously close to unfolding in America not too long ago. They were but an inch away from making the same costly mistake here, caught up in this election fraud hysteria. I have no doubt a good chunk of support would be given to the military to overthrow Biden if the opportunity presented itself. This is yet another reason why the military cannot be political, because politics are asinine these days, as I've said. They're deranging. They'll make you crazy. And you don't want that contagion getting into the minds of the people with the guns. Now, once again, this brings me to some of my favorite topics. It's the importance of truth, trust, and free debate in a country. First of all, as you can see here in Myanmar, the notion of truth is corrupted. You don't know if the election was actually stolen or not. The military says it was, the council says it was not, and as a result, we have conflict. Because when there isn't a shared truth, a shared reality, people are going to fight. In this world, there are two mechanisms for resolving conflict, either discussion or combat. If I have an issue with someone, or they have an issue with me, and we have to solve the problem, there are two ways to solve it. We talk about it like mature, civilized people, or we're going to fight about it. Period. That's it. The two tools you have. Now, you cannot have a proper discussion if you two do not regard the same entity as being true. If you think the election was not stolen, and someone else thinks it was, you're not going to have a conversation with them. It's impossible to have a discussion because you two are in two separate realities. There's no bridging the gap there. You are wholly convinced of something, and the other person is wholly convinced of the opposite. So, what other choice is left to you? If that person is posing a serious problem, and you have to resolve it, or you feel like you have to resolve it, but you can't talk to them, you have to fight and use violence. That's the way that humans work. You have two choices there. And if your country, if your civilization does not regard truth in the highest regard, if you don't strive for it, if you don't make it easy to get, you're going to get conflict. That's how things work, and that's what we've seen throughout all of history. It's a lesson that we have not heeded in the modern world. Now, the other two things I mentioned are tied to truth. If a country is prioritizing truth, if people can get on the same page about the fundamentals of a country, and we're not talking about agreeing about everything. That's not what truth is. We can see a shared reality. For example, the immigration numbers or whatever. 300,000 people a year coming into your country, for example. One person can look at that and say it's high, another can look at it and say it's low, but at least the fundamental truth is there. The amount of people entering the country. You agree on that, the number, it's a fact, and now you can debate about whether it's high or low by using other facts and tying it into an argument. That's how discussion works. When the very basis of the argument, though, is corrupted, and you can't agree on that, the sky is blue, the sky is green, we can't even talk about going outside anymore, because we don't share the same fundamental pillars. A conversation cannot happen at that level. And if that cannot happen, there'll be no trust. People will not trust the institution. If they see that their notion of truth is not the same as yours, or you're talking in various different shades, people will not trust you. And that happened in Canada and America, where you had individuals at the CDC and the UN telling you, don't wear a mask, it's dangerous. And then it turns out they were wrong. It was untrue. Now, maybe it was untrue because they were just mistaken. Maybe because they had another agenda, such as they were fearing people rushing to the stores and clearing out all the masks or whatever. But when you betray the truth and you don't own up to it, trust goes away. When trust goes away, various implications occur. People start to deviate and create their own truth. And you fracture the country in many ways now. Then what happens? The only cure for that is free debate, free discourse, to freely talk about these ideas and recover, to revive that underpinning of discussion, to talk about the fundamental pillars of the issue freely, without fear of being condemned or thrown into jail. Otherwise, we'll never bring truth back. So if people are talking about the election fraud, whatever, we need a free, open, honest debate about the facts there, so we can convince people to get to the other side or the other, whatever the case may be. Free, open debate or free speech is the cure to bring back truth. It's the mechanism that allows us to balance the scales. It allows us to reveal idiocy in our midst. It's the mechanism that allows for a civilized society to flourish. And once you can get the wheels churning again there through free speech and debate, then you can start earning back some trust. But if you're not open to free speech and debate, if it's your way or the highway, if people who don't agree with you are vile enemies, then you're not going to revive that. There will always be that fracture between people, different groups in your country. And with that, truth goes out the window and also trust. So, lessons to be heeded here for the rest of the world. There are many. I am disgusted with what's happened in Myanmar. The military had no place to be doing this. There is no room for the military to act politically in a democratic system. It's complete chaos, and I do hope it's resolved with little to no bloodshed. I would hate for the military to get shaken and start attacking people. That'd be the worst case scenario, and of course when that happens, the rest of the world has to step in. The UN is too scared to condemn them because of China, but America, Europe, and Canada, it's our duty to keep an eye on what's going on. This here is a stain on the name of democracy, honestly. It's a tragedy and something to be condemned and kept an eye on. The UN isn't going to do it, but we have to. And if push comes to shove, we do have to be willing to step in there and help the people. The citizens are innocent here, and they're being taken to task by a malicious army, a malicious military. That can't stand. Now, I think that covers the gist of it. Of course, there is more nuance and more details, and I do welcome you to look those up online. But I do hope this was a succinct summary to get you started on the topic. So that now brings me to the end of our conversation for today. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to leave a review and share. And you can also find me online at perryplatform.org and on social media at perryplatform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.